I think all of us probably as executives are dashboard and data driven.
Sure.
And the first place we want to go as a new CFO or new CEO is show me the data. But the data doesn't always reflect how your customers are feeling, patients and physicians.
Welcome to Operator Insights. I'm Julie Roberts. Today with us we have Judson Ivy, our founder and CEO of Ensemble Health Partners. Judson, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Julie.
Well, we're glad to have you. I think what we want to talk about really is change that happens in healthcare.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. And let's kind of focus on executive transitions in leadership.
Yeah.
So your background prior to Ensemble was within a healthcare system.
Yeah.
So tell us about you and your role as, in that leadership role and learning and navigating revenue cycle.
Yeah. It's, Julie, I think that for me, my role was I had kind of worked my way up. So I'd been in many of those jobs and had the perspective of like what to do and what not. Still made some mistakes along the way. But every time I would kind of go in, I was learning on those mistakes I'd made previously, what worked well and what didn't. And I think, the most critical point, whether you're in healthcare or not, is just take a really good inventory of what's going well, what's not, and then put a plan together. And I think that's the most important part of leadership, is just laying that plan out and then communicating it and then getting everybody on board and making everybody feel part of it. So I would say that my journey was somewhat unique because I had been through many positions and I could always try to look at the perspective of the people that were below me in other departments, and not all leaders get that benefit.
What advice would you give? So if there's a transition in a healthcare organization, a new CEO, a new CFO, what advice would you give them about understanding the health of their revenue cycle to really get in there and understand?
Yeah. I would say that part of making an assessment about revenue cycle is walking around talking to folks, right? So many times we try to look at the scorecard and the metrics. And for a new CFO and CEO, the first place I would go is registration and talk to patient access and sit there in the lobby and watch and say, what does it really look like to be a patient in my facility? And how does it feel? And then make your way around to all of those revenue cycle departments and understand all of the impacts. Not only what are the associates feeling, but also what are your customers, i.e. physicians and patients, and how does it really work? Because I think all of us probably as executives are dashboard and data driven.
Sure.
And the first place we want to go as a new CFO or new CEO is show me the data. But the data doesn't always reflect how your customers are feeling, patients and physicians.
I agree with that. You got to go beyond the dashboard metrics.
Absolutely.
For advice for that new leader in learning the landscape, they do that work and they look at both the data and the people side of things and say, I'm not sure we're running on all cylinders.
Yeah.
What would you recommend they do?
Yeah. I think there's always a couple sides. So sometimes it's you've identified you're not running on all cylinders, and that's a good thing, right? That's saying, hey, we need to check up.
Right.
And one of the great things I love about our assessment process is it really is a checkup. But also there are times in leaders which we say, look, we think things are running really well, and you need additional validation of that as well.
Right.
Because my advice would be, if everything looks really good and sounds really good, you probably just want to check the engine again to make sure that it truly is good. And I always look at kind of the listening and learning process to say, could I learn something better, even if it's going really well? Like, what are other people doing? And that's the unique thing about healthcare, is that we're all commonly taking care of a patient, and that's our goal and our mission, but we all kind of do it a lot of different ways, especially when it comes to revenue cycles. So there is always something to learn different about how other people are tackling the same problem, because we pretty much all have the same problems.
Right. If you, let's say in this situation, there is an organization that's thinking, hey, I might need a checkup, right? What would you recommend for them to to go out on the limb and start the conversations of is a partnership needed, right? That's not a comfortable conversation to have internally when you see a dashboard that may not be tip-top shape. But what advice would you give them to broach that subject about a partnership?
Yeah, I think, Julie, it's interesting because just this last week I was having a conversation with a potential customer around an assessment. And I was struck by how open and inviting they were, because sometimes it can be, I'm not sure I want to open up the kimono for someone to see what my issues were.
Right.
And I talked to this leader about their leadership, and they'd been a CEO a long time, and the CFO that was at the table had been one relatively for a short period of time. But they both commonly agreed to say, if there's someone that's doing it better or can help us do it better, let's learn about it. And they weren't defensive about, our way is the only way, because I think what we've all learned is that there are so many different perspectives on this business, and we can learn something from each other. So I would say the first, yes, it can be difficult to tell your team, hey, I want to have someone else come in and look under the hood. I think the conversation is different if you say, I want to have someone come in, validate the really good things we're doing, and give us tools for the things that you need help on. Because all of us have that whiteboard either in our office or in our head that we know secretly, kind of as leaders, where the gaps are and the things that we know we need to work on. They just we've not had the time or resources to do it. And the great thing about inviting someone in and help is that you're really taking a shortcut to say, I want to help you look into my issue that I think I may have, but also want you to give me some solutions. And that means you're not alone in finding those solutions. And you're actually talking to people that may have tried and tested those solutions. And it's a little bit more comfort than kind of going out on your own.
You mentioned kind of coming in and looking under the hood, and that's kind of that moment of, opening yourself up. I know that when you founded this company, right, you had been on the receiving end of folks in blue suits that may have come in and told you things that you already knew about.
Yeah.
What was your focus in making Ensemble's assessments different?
Yeah. Well, we called those people in blue suits the SWAT team. And I was always told the SWAT team was going to show up at my hospital if I didn't make the right metrics. And we always pictured them hopping out of like black SUVs. And really they didn't. But what did they do?
Right.
Those types of consultants gave us information that was a regurgitation of the same problem that you could have asked me and I would have told you we are struggling with for free. I would have told you that. And it's sometimes that CEOs and CFOs feel like they're validated sometimes by external parties versus, as most operators and health systems know, we know what the issues are. And so when I started the company, it was like, look, I have to promise that, one, it will never be a gotcha moment, because I had been subject to that, right, where a consultant comes in, they do an assessment, they write the report, they give it to your boss, and the boss says to you, and you're like, well, if they'd asked me about it, I would have told them that was not the case, right? Those are called gotcha moments, when you're catching somebody off guard. So as you know about our assessment process, we do daily roundbacks, and that's not because I thought it was a great idea. I just don't ever want people to be surprised. And I want their collaboration on what they see the opportunity is and what they've tried as a solution. So it's not a one-dimensional, here's what we say is the fix. The second part, I think, to the difference in how we do our assessments is I always want the people that participate in the assessments to walk away with something tangible to help them in their job tomorrow. And so if we're talking to the billing manager or a biller or a case manager or a collections person, I don't want it just to be we take notes and walk away and they never hear anything again. If they're struggling with a revenue code or they're struggling with a policy for a payer, I actually want us to give and help them that day.
Right.
And that's the difference, is that I also wanted to make sure that we were bringing people that could help people. And as you know, our operators are really good at their jobs. And so that's why we have operators go and talk to these hospitals and health systems, not consultants. Because I want them to have the solution or a solution.
Yes, and as someone who's participated in those, I think it becomes an organic conversation, right? You meet people where they are, which is, I'm having this problem. Have you ever dealt with it? And those moments are really when magic happens, right?
Yeah, and they don't have to go at it on their own. And I think if we put ourselves in their shoes, when you feel like you're trying to solve a problem on your own, it can be pretty lonely because you're tasked with solving it. But it's like, I kind of equate our assessments to like online chat media, like where people are solving really complex problems, through crowdsourcing, because that's really what we're helping these providers and folks do, is to solve a problem that we've already talked to another 500 hospitals or another 10,000 physicians, and we're bringing them solutions that have already been tried.
No, I completely agree. I kind of want to turn the tables a little bit and talk about you personally.
Yeah.
Service is really important to you, and as someone who has traveled with you, you inspect and have high quality of standards and expectations of buildings and seating and things like that. Yeah. How does that level of service expectations, how have you set those standards here at Ensemble to be different for our clients?
Yeah. Well, you have picked out my one thing, Julie, that I'm obsessive about is about service, and it's something that is really important to me, because I think that's how customers make a connection. It is about the service they receive and the moments we're there for them and how we respond to their needs. We're not going to always be perfect. We're going to make mistakes.
Right.
But service recovery is probably more important than the service itself. And so I do have really high standards. And I think that over time, technology will change and the widgets will change and the landscape changes. But ultimately, customers, meaning our CFOs and CEOs, their physicians and their patients, you can't replace just being treated really well with respect and dignity, and knowing that what's important to you as a customer is important to me. And yes, there'll be evolutions of technology and evolutions of the landscape and policies and procedures and all of that. But when it comes down to it, if you and I have a mutual relationship to know that we can count on each other, then I think that's the foundation for everything. And so, me, I am somewhat, I would say, intolerant to lack of service, because I think it's the foundation for everything else.
Yeah, it sets the stage for sure.
Yes, it does.
If you were, kind of talking to someone about, outsourcing, having a partnership or a relationship, Ensemble certainly isn't the only name in this space.
Yeah.
But what we've created is pretty amazing.
It is absolutely amazing.
What are you most proud of that you share with those CEOs and CFOs in boardrooms about our people, our teams, the things that you're most proud of that translates to them?
Yeah. First of all, the word outsourcing gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yes.
Because, I think people think of like, here's my set of keys, I hand them to you and be gone with it, right? I really do see it as a partnership, because, and what am I most proud about those partnerships? I'm proud that we're there to help health systems that are struggling with a bunch of different things, that we're there for them. We don't save lives, as billers and collectors and coders, we don't. But if I can and we can help empower that, what they're trying to do in local communities, is really important to me. And that sounds cliche, but many of you know in my background, I work for 2 really great big hospital companies, and those companies bought up a lot of other smaller hospitals. And I love the fact that we're helping those hospitals today remain independent. And our people are, people hear me say this all the time, and they're probably sick of hearing me say it, Julie, is that our people really are the difference. And that's not a slogan. It's when I have to make the list of all the things why Ensemble is successful, and then the list of things that our competitors do, there's only one thing that I consistently write at the top of my list, and that kind of when I make my checklist, and that's people. And that's the way that our people love our customers, the way that they care for them, the way they care for each other, the way we work hard for each other and hold each other accountable. That cannot be replicated.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the clients that we serve. So we serve clients all over the country, and it is really important to you and this leadership team that we have a presence and give back to our clients' communities.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the why around that and why that's important for our partnership and our culture that we have internally.
Yeah. When I started the company, I'd seen a lot of kind of outsourcing. and the outsourcing seemed to like drain the blood out of the hospital into other areas, and you're like, well, I don't live in where their corporate office is, and so how does that help me? I want us to support the local areas in which our clients are in. Not all the money and donations and resources should come back to where the corporate office of Ensemble is, and so that's why it's really important to me that we give back in the communities that we serve. Why? Well, that's because that health system in that local community is supporting us.
Right.
They have selected us, and we have the honor of being their partner. We should give back to the communities that they live in, and that's the purpose.
Great. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
All right, so we typically wrap these interviews up with a more kind of personal question. If you could tell your 18-year-old self anything, what would that be and why?
One is that I was going to lose my hair.
Okay.
No, it would have been nice to know.
To be prepared.
To be prepared. Yes, to be prepared. It would be to be more empathetic, and how much empathy has to do with success. I think as a young person, we're always focused on how do you get the next, at least I was, to the next rung in the ladder. How do I get my paycheck increased? And early on, I'm not proud of it, but I was a workaholic, to say the least, and it didn't really matter how I was impacting other people to get those results. And I cared about people, but look, if that meant I had to spend 15 hours in the office, there were many nights I slept there, and I wasn't empathetic to what was going on in other people's lives. And I would say that would be my 18-year-old self to say, look, realize that your success is going to be 3/4 the result of someone else. And only 1/4 of what you're going to contribute as a leader. And so invest 3/4 of your time making other people feel empowered and good, and only 1/4 of your time worried about you.
I think that's good advice for any leader in any industry that transcends from just revenue cycles. So thanks for sharing that.
It would have been a lot easier for me if I had learned it at 18.
Well, thanks for your time. I know you're a very busy man,
Thanks,
but
Julie.
we appreciate talking to you today.
Thank you.
Be on the lookout for more operator insights.